It feels like a lifetime ago that Valve's flagship franchise Half-Life first graced our presence, and few PC gamers will need an introduction. First releasing in 1998, it became a critical success and was widely regarded as one of the best games ever made, seeing developers Valve follow it up with 2 expansions and a multiplayer mode. This led to development of a sequel, Half-Life 2, which eventually released back in 2004. Much like the original title, it also saw critical acclaim and saw a much wider audience through its inclusion within Valve's Orange Box years later on home consoles. Seeing 2 follow-up episodes released in 2006 and 2007, these were intended to be an episodic trilogy, but the infamous Episode 3 never materialized despite previous promises, leaving the storyline on a cliffhanger ending. It's been 13 years since Episode 2, but next week, as of time of recording, Half-Life finally makes its grand return through Half-Life Alyx, a virtual reality exclusive set between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2. With Alyx almost here, it's worth looking back upon Half-Life 2. Coming with an interesting development history both before and after its release, it became one of the PC's most widely studied games. I'm Rich from WhatCulture Gaming, and these are 12 things you didn't know about Half-Life 2. Number 12. A series marred by delays. For many years, you couldn't escape the inevitable Half-Life 3 confirmed jokes that came with any major gaming news. Having seen Half-Life 2 Episode 3 face delays to the point where fans just gave up on it, many were surprised that Half-Life Alyx stuck to its initial confirmed release window. Historically though, it's a series notable for delays. Half-Life 1 was initially scheduled for a November 1997 release, but Valve was unsatisfied with it, so they completely reworked the game and released it a year later instead. Half-Life 2 faced similar issues, though this received much greater public attention. Aiming to be finished by the end of 2003, it became increasingly apparent within Valve that this deadline would not be met, and a playable build was leaked, confirming this. Speaking of the leak, Valve managed to dupe the leaker, getting him to send his address to Valve saying he's got himself a job, to which they then sent the FBI to his house. Nicely done. Working through high levels of crunch after Christmas, Half-Life 2 finally released in October 2004. Number 11. Half-Life 2 Survivor. Half-Life inspired numerous spin-offs, but chances are you are completely aware that Valve even created an arcade version. Developed between Valve and Taito Corporation, Half-Life 2 Survivor was a Japan-exclusive title that released back in 2006. Controlling Gordon Freeman, you utilized 2 joysticks and floor pedals to control him in a manner not unlike Time Crisis. It contained 3 modes such as Story, which slimmed down 2's campaign to just the shooting sections, Mission, which allowed you to play its story in multiplayer, and Battle, adapting Half-Life 2's deathmatch mode. It shut down 4 years later, though fans have attempted to revive it through an unofficial PC port. It's a unique Half-Life experience and one of many oddities in the franchise's history. Number 10. GMan is never referred to as GMan. GMan is undoubtedly the most enigmatic character in Half-Life. Acting as an interdimensional bureaucrat, this mysterious character watches you across Half-Life and features prominently at the end before taking a more active role in his interactions with Gordon across Half-Life 2. Much like the Hood in Thunderbirds though, this mysterious character is never actually given a name in-game, and the nickname refers to an American expression, Government Man. GMan has only been called this nickname in Half-Life 2's credits and in interviews with Valve employees so far, and his true name remains unknown, keeping his identity closely guarded and his real motives a mystery. It's unlikely that Half-Life Alyx will shed any further light on this, but considering Valve has mentioned that Alyx is a return to the world and not the end of it, we may find out more. Number 9. Peggle Extreme. When PopCap Games first released their puzzle game Peggle back in 2007, it received positive critical reception and proved highly addictive, combining elements of pinball and pachinko. Seeing an expansion and 2 follow-up titles, one entry that often gets forgotten is Peggle Extreme. It might seem odd to list this here, but Peggle Extreme uniquely featured levels inspired by Half-Life 2, along with Portal and Team Fortress 2. Featuring 10 levels and 5 challenges, it initially came packaged with the PC version of the Orange Box, but was later released as a free download in 2008. Learning that Valve staff often played Peggle in their offices, PopCap Games proposed a crossover that paid tribute to Valve's Orange Box titles, one that Valve happily accepted. And even further fun fact, Peggle Extreme is actually the first Peggle game I played. You know that unicorn that hosts the game? He's eaten by a headcrab on the title screen. Brilliant. Number 8. Episode 4. Whilst they continued their attempts at developing Episode 3, Valve had already begun plans for making Episode 4. Its existence was revealed by Gabe Newell in May 2006, explaining that this will be a standalone episode separate from the episodic trilogy. Whilst not much became known of Episode 4 at the time, further details were revealed back in 2015 that it was under development with Warren Spector's company Junction Point Studios. It would have brought in new mechanics, with Spector teasing a magnet gun that would operate differently from the gravity gun, and that both would have been super complementary. Revealing this chapter would revolve around Ravenholm with a focus on Father Grigori, Spector confirmed that Junction Point ended up doing a concept development for Valve while also working for Disney on a project that became Epic Mickey before it was cancelled. Episode 4's development wasn't abandoned, however, and this soon passed to Arcane Studios. Number 7. The other Episode 4. Upon taking up development of Episode 4, Arcane Studios continued Warren Spector's idea of a standalone episode based around Ravenholm and gained a new working title, Return to Ravenholm, though actual development was completely restarted. Due to take place canonically before the end of Episode 2, its existence was revealed back in 2012 by series writer Mark Laidlaw and would have kept the inclusion of Father Grigori. It saw various leaks in 2013, revealing screenshots and rendered assets intended for the game after previously coming up on the CVs of former project developers. Later confirmed by Arcane Studios that you wouldn't assume the role of Gordon Freeman, they instead pointed to a different, very interesting character, and Laidlaw later confirmed it would have stuck more closely to the atmosphere of horror. Sadly, we'll never fully know just what they had planned. Number 6. Ruined Casserole. The start of Half-Life had some surprisingly light-hearted moments in it and provided many interactive moments uncommon for games in 1998, such as passing toilet roll to a Black Mesa scientist in, trouble. In the grand scheme of things, these actions didn't mean anything, but they provided a level of interactivity otherwise unseen at the time. It was quite a surprise then to see Half-Life 2 make a very specific throwback to this section through the absolute bastard that is Dr. Magnuson, a fellow surviving scientist from Black Mesa. A supporting character that helps the Resistance with tech development, he tells Gordon on one occasion before leaving,
"I might just forgive you for that debacle at Black Mesa. You know the one I mean, involving a certain microwave casserole."
It's an incredibly obscure reference to this opening section of Half-Life 1, where you could interact with a microwave and ruin someone's lunch by jamming the power button. Who could have known that many years later, Dr. Magnuson would still hold this incident against you even after the Combine invasion? See, he's an arsehole. He's an absolute arsehole. Number 5. Nods to 1984. George Orwell's 1984 novel was an unforgiving read. Set amongst a political dystopia, it imagined England as a province of Oceania, a superstate that rules through government overreach, repression, totalitarianism, and mass surveillance, led by the mysterious Big Brother. It became one of the 20th century's most influential books, and Valve took influence from it when designing Half-Life 2, which featured giant broadcasting screens across City 17, where Dr. Breen makes his announcements. Hell, the start of Half-Life 2 even shows a room called Room 101, where 1984 protagonist Winston was tortured. It's reminiscent of Big Brother, and Half-Life 2 doesn't stop there, making direct reference to the Oranges and Lemons nursery rhyme seen within Orwell's novel via graffiti, and Chapter 6 also includes a rebel named Winston as further reference. Valve also recreated the famous 1984 Mac advert when they brought Steam to Macs, using characters from Half-Life 2. Orwell's novel inspired Valve in so many ways, and even to this day, creative media still looks upon it for inspiration. Number 4. Valve used real people as reference models. It may seem like common practice these days to base characters off real-life actors for AAA games, something especially true with the rise of motion capture technology, and it's often used to create the most realistic graphical experience possible, but it wasn't always the case. Back in the early 2000s, it was still uncommon for developers to take this approach, often creating characters from the ground up instead, and not being inspired by actors, but keeping the models different enough to not get sued. Valve decided against that approach and hired a number of actors utilizing their faces for character textures. Whilst they certainly weren't major actors, Valve hired Frank Sheldon for G-Man, Roger Guay for Wallace Breen, Jamil Mullen for Alex Vance, and more. It's a small detail, but one that helped give life to Half-Life 2's cast, making them seem human. Also, fun fact, the guy who visually depicted Eli Vance was a homeless guy outside of Valve's offices. I hope they paid him. Number 3. Ivan the Space Biker. With his bright orange HEV suit, green eyes, and striking glasses, Gordon Freeman is one of gaming's most iconic protagonists visually, but he wasn't always like this. If Valve had stuck with their initial plans, he could have been completely different. Retaining his brown hair and green eyes, this version of Gordon, dubbed Ivan the Space Biker, featured a much thicker beard, no glasses, flat top haircut, and a wildly different HEV suit. It wasn't well received by playtesters, and that led to Gordon's eventual redesign, though Ivan's character model can still be located within Half-Life 1's files. Whilst this is more about the original game than Half-Life 2, it just goes to show what could have been for our protagonist if Valve committed to this Viking-esque approach. Number 2. The gravity gun wasn't meant to be there. Half-Life 2's zero-point energy field manipulator, better known as the gravity gun, is amongst Gordon's more iconic weapons, and its primary intention is for heavy lifting, or clearing minefields. If used right, it can be one of Gordon's most dangerous weapons though, and proves an invaluable tool, so you might be surprised to learn that Valve initially intended to remove it from Half-Life 2. Initially there were plans to include a fizz gun. This item was also capable of picking up objects from different ranges and moving them about, but caused a number of glitches and exploits. As such, Valve saw fit to remove it from Half-Life 2, but the fizz gun later made its way into Gary's mod using the same graphical model as the gravity gun. Number 1. The all-knowing Vortigaunt. Half-Life 2 is full of hidden references, but these aren't always scenery clues. One major example of this featured in Chapter 4, Water Hazard, where Gordon Freeman encounters a lone Vortigaunt roasting a head crab over an open fire. If you try and speak with him, he would provide many cryptic statements, a lot of which reference the events of Half-Life, such as,
"We see you still in Black Mesa. Clearly we see you in the Nailance chamber."
If you keep speaking to him, he'll eventually start reciting every single Vortigaunt line in the game. More interestingly, he appears to break the fourth wall on 2 occasions and tells Freeman,
"Far distant eyes look out through yours. Something secret steers us both. We shall not name it."
It's one of the more interesting Easter eggs in-game and helps cement Freeman's connection with the Vortigaunt race. And that is my list. Is there anything about Half-Life 2 that I've not said here? And are you excited for Half-Life Alyx? By Jove, I know I am. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of all this, and don't forget to subscribe to WhatCulture Gaming if you have not already. I've been Rich. You can follow me on Twitter at PickupChangeToe. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you soon.